Hot
All
damn.
right. We're
There
both
we
here.
go. There we go, man. Adam Ruzzo. Am I saying your last name right? Is it Ruzzo?
Yeah, I've been called worse. You can say whatever you want.
Perfect, man. So, dude, I just want to say you have a crazy life, from what I can tell. So I came across you on TikTok, right? I forget how I came across your page, but I'm like, wow, this guy's living the dream. He's living in an off-grid cabin. So before we get into everything, you know, about your cabin and your life there, like where did you come from before getting to that point? Like, how did you get from, you know, point A to point B?
Oh,
You know,
man. Well,
tell us the story.
sure. Well, I'm from Oshawa, Ontario originally, so the old Durham region. But yeah, it's probably a mixture of things. I mean, I grew up like my mother's side, they come from the Ottawa Valley area, and they were all farmers, and they are all builders, and they lived, you know, that kind of life. So I was used to it already, and we grew up camping as children too. So that was already kind of in me. But you know, once life got rolling and I got reading a lot of things about, you know, the state of the environment, state of the world, and I saw, you know, I kind of got in with the YouTube age where everyone's posting their crazy lives on the internet, and I saw some people doing the off-grid thing, and I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. So you're telling me I could build my own place if I had the money and not have a mortgage, which is my current situation. It's a cheap enough place to do it, and not have many bills because I'm on renewable energy. And if I were to do that, that'd eliminate the stress of money, because my whole life, my whole working life, I've been a musician, and well, you can imagine how much money I don't make. So with all those things factored in together, it just made sense to give it a try. So that's the long story very short, but that's kind of what happened. I just kind of went for it.
Wow, man, that's amazing. So you started off in Oshawa, and you grew up there. And did you go to school? Like, did you finish high school, or you finished university, and then you were working as a musician, and then you decided to go off grid? Is that how the trajectory went, or? Pretty
much. I actually, well, I have a master's degree in music, believe it or not. So I actually did the whole gauntlet of U of T. I was living in Toronto, and I actually had I had a very weird university life, because I landed a sweet gig when I was 19 years old playing at the Royal York Hotel by Union Station. So had you seen me back then, I was wearing like fancy clothes playing at the Royal York for everybody for 6 or 7 years. And so instead of partying every Friday and Saturday night, I was playing gigs and more or less behaving myself. So by the time school was done, and since I lived close by, you know, I both lived in Toronto and I kind of lived at home, just save on rent and all that. By the time school was done, I was one of those people who wasn't in debt, believe it or not. So that gave me a big head start on life. And from then I was able to have the money saved up to do this. And very shortly after I finished school, I realized there's no security in my lifestyle, because I lost all my gigs kind of right away. And then I had to, you know, move to a room in a house. And then after that, I'm like, well, I got nothing to lose here. I'm going to go see what's out there. So I decided to, you know, travel the wilderness of Canada and do that part of my story.
Why did you lose all your gigs after you graduated from UT? How did that happen?
Well, so to get into the specifics of it. So at the Royal York Hotel, I had a suite set up that only lasted about, like, it was Friday and Saturday night for the longest time. Then they started giving me Sunday and Saturday afternoons playing there as well. So in my entire weekend, I made decent money as a musician, which was pretty rare. Like, most musicians have to teach or do whatever, but I didn't have to. Like, I was, you know, for a while there, I was living downtown, and I made enough money on the weekend to basically have a pretty lazy week, like do what I wanted. And a lot of times I came up to Algonquin Park and hiked, but it didn't last very long. So basically I think I made some demand, like I wanted some time switched for my shifts. And then I realized once I asked that, the upper management found out I was actually there. It's such a giant hotel. They just kept me in like a miscellaneous expense account the entire time. So no one really knew I was there. except for the people that went to the bar. And so right away I was like, wow, that's like, I can't believe I lasted that long there, you know, giant corporate atmosphere, right? And I was just like bottom of the barrel, kind of eking out an existence there, and it worked for me. I live a simple life anyways. I don't buy much stuff. Like I'm not one of these, I'm not a materialistic type person. I live pretty simple. So it worked. And then I lost all the gigs, all my bread and butter. I still had another gig downtown and I was doing a little bit of teaching, but I went from making good money and living in a nicer place to like living in a not as great a place, which is still okay, but you know, not as fancy, I guess, and uh, making way less money.
Wow,
So,
man, holy smokes. So for people who aren't from Toronto, like the Royal York is pretty much the swankiest, most high-end, most epic hotel that we have. It's been there for like 200 years, right? So playing as a musician, were you on piano or guitar, or what were you playing?
Yeah, I played in the library bar, a really quiet, dark bar. I think it's the decor hasn't changed since like the 1930s. It's pretty cool. It's all wood. Uh, and I played guitar in there, and I didn't know it at the time. Like I was such a kid that, I mean, I was rubbing shoulders with like politicians and celebrities and CEOs, and like to me they were just adults, right? Just like, they're grown ups, you know. But I met all these people. It's just crazy. At one point I met the guy who the chief of the defense staff, the guy who ran the entire army for the country. He was there and he tried to get me. Yeah, he tried to get me to join the army.
It was by
But anyway,
Rick Hillier or somebody like that, man. That's crazy. Yeah, it's like the who's who of Canadian, you know, politics and entertainment and all that stuff hang out in that place. So that's crazy, man. I had no idea. So you had done a master's in music at U of T. You were working at the Royal York, probably one of the coolest gigs you could have as a working musician, right? And you were making good cash, but then things kind of started to fall apart in terms of your gigs. And it was at that point that you decided that you wanted to get out. And I think I saw something. You went to the Yukon. Did you go to the Yukon or Alaska for a number of months?
I went to both Yukon and the Northwest Territories for several months. Yeah.
Holy crap, man! And so, like, what made you decide to pick up from, you know, hobnobbing with all the who's who of Toronto socialites in Royal York to go to those places in northern Canada?
Yeah. Well, it was a very gradual unwinding after that. So like I did enjoy my gigs a lot at the Royal York. But there was part of me that once you leave school and you get wrapped up in a job, like I had and I never really like I said, my Friday and Saturday nights were playing guitar for all these adults. Like I didn't have that crazy party phase. It just kind of, yeah, you know, so there's part of me that wanted to get out there and see what was out there. And the other thing is too, like, I've always loved the outdoors. I've always loved camping, like backcountry camping. I've always loved that. So I felt myself kind of getting roped into this life of, you know, everyone's life, what most people do. Like, it's like, I got this good job, so I'm going to stick with it and see where it takes me. And, you know, and then you get wrapped up in a place with a lot of bills, and then you stay with that job because you got all these bills, and it's like a cycle, right? So I was getting into that. And, I was like, I got this window. I'm not gonna do that. I want to really, I want to see what's out there, and I want to learn how to use my hands in another way, not just, you know, playing guitar. Like I kind of found myself, the more you get wrapped up in the business world, so to speak, or whatever job you're doing, you kind of you get separated from the realities of life in a certain way. You don't know how to do anything else. It's like, this is all you do. It's just your one job. So I wanted to just explore that side of life. And I left a really great teaching job in the Roncesvalles area. I loved it there, and they were sad to see me go, and I was sad to go, but I was like, I got to get out and see the country. And like, cause the other thing is too, if you're from the GTA, that's the world. That's your universe, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. So what was it also kind of like a civilization versus wilderness thing? Like you wanted to experience living in the wilderness versus living in civilization? Was it that kind of dichotomy as well?
Totally. Yeah. So I definitely felt that call of the wilds, you know. Anyone who's been in the backcountry for more than a couple nights, they get this feeling in them that they can't really ignore. It's this kind of primal memory of sorts. It's like, wow, this is amazing, and this is totally different than what I've been taught my whole life. And I was tuned into that. And so I, in a sense, answered the call. And I wanted to experience wilderness living. City living is and I've really come to appreciate them after living this way for a long time. But I had this urge to get out into the solitude, get away from the craziness. Look around us now. It's like, germs, and everyone's stressed out, and they live in this kind of world that's completely separate from a lot of the realities, the simple truths of life. Totally separated from the simple truths of life. They live in this kind of made up human world, which has nothing to do with the environment, nothing to do with the things that actually support us. And I kind of saw this happening, and I was like, this is crazy. I gotta get out of here. So that was definitely part of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I can believe it. So,
yeah.
So you got on the road and you headed up to the Northwest Territories in the Yukon. And did you have a plan, or did you just show up there?
So I actually, technology comes in to save the day here. There was a great site called Workaway, and it's kind of similar to woofing, but these people just put this is my homestead, come help out in exchange for a place to stay and free food, and just work here 5-6 hours a day. So I did that. I went to Saskatchewan, and that was an amazing place. I had no idea there were moose roaming the prairies, but there are. And so that was my first stop. Two amazing homesteaders there. And then I went out to the BC mountains, stayed there for just over probably a few months, lived in a cabin, and lived with, I have a relative out there in a small mountain town in the Kootenays I stayed with for a while, experienced life in the mountains. And then I went up to the Yukon, and I helped that place. I just stayed with a friend, and I helped restore the old paddle wheeler in Whitehorse, which was random but really cool. So that was an actual paid job. And then my final stop on that big journey was working at a bush lodge out in the Northwest Territories for about 4 months, Blatchford Lake Lodge, and living on a houseboat in Yellowknife Bay for a while too. So
no way.
Yeah.
So that lodge that you were working at, was that a hunting and fishing lodge, or what was that?
I was more of an ecotourism place. They do a lot of Northern Lights sightseeing, and there were some Dene guys working up there, Patrick and William. I still remember their names, and they did net fishing. So they took us out net fishing and stuff, and we built Quincy there, put up teepees, did all that stuff. And I shared a tiny canvas tent with 3 other guys in the dead of winter. Yeah.
Nice, man. Lots of cuddling together to get warm at night.
Oh, yeah, jeez. Yeah. I'm a light sleeper, so that was intense. That was the hardest part.
I can imagine. Oh my God, man. Well, so then how much time did you end up spending there in total before deciding to settle down with the cabin and building the cabin and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that was about 4 or 5 months up in the far north. And after that, I actually did a primitive skills apprenticeship because I was kind of on a roll with all the outdoor stuff, and I was really into it. And by that point, the break from music was kind of nice. I was kind of enjoying, because all I'd ever known was just gigs. And I was like, oh, this is a nice freedom. So I took a primitive skills apprenticeship, which lasted 8 months in Ontario. And I lived on a 100-acre property there in a shelter I built myself, and learned friction fire, bow building, flint knapping, edible plants, and the works, and immersed myself in that world. And and it was after that I decided to buy land. And
wow. So you did that for 8 months. And where was this course? Where were you in Ontario doing this?
It was in the Beaver Valley of actually Southern Ontario. So the Beaver Valley is one of the last wild places in Southern Ontario. It's a beautiful area, and
Where is that? Where is Beaver Valley?
it's just outside of. It's actually outside of Orangeville, and the place. Yeah, I was on kind of the outskirts of that. The property I was on bordered the Bruce Trail, and the property was about 100 acres, maybe about half an hour outside of Collingwood. And yeah, totally. I mean, when you, it's, saying it's, half hour from Collingwood sounds it's pretty civilized, but when you're on a piece of land for a while, like you forget the whole world exists. I mean, it was a beautiful area. And yeah, so I learned a lot there. And it obviously was a huge confidence builder in terms of doing what I'm in right now. So yeah.
Yeah.
Probably
So
the confidence builder.
Really? So that was critical to be able to.
Oh yeah.
Like, did you learn how to fell trees and like skin the trees and all of those kind of skills that you would need to build a log cabin? You learned it at that place.
Actually, no. Those places, the primitive skills apprenticeship was kind of more of a purist thing. It was like primitive skills, like. That's what we did. We did some stuff with modern tools, but hardly anything. Like that was like back to basics. The main thing I took from that experience was living was a nature connection piece, like living as like part of the landscape, being totally comfortable at baseline. Like, and so that basically gave me the confidence to live in my tent here for 9 months before I had this place built, because had you told me a couple of years before living in a tent for 9 months, I wouldn't even be able to imagine it. But I was like, oh yeah, I've done that, so and I was totally comfortable outside at that point and living outside. So that was a big piece. The one thing it did teach me how to use a draw knife, which was critical, because after I cut the trees, you have to peel all the bark with this hand tool, just 2 pieces of wood and a blade. So I did learn that at the Primitive Skills Apprenticeship, but all the other skills kind of came from the other stuff I was doing before that.
Holy crap, man. That is so cool. So that was at a place called Beaver Valley. And then at the end of that course, you decided, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm going to look for a property to settle down on. Like, how did you go about looking for a property, and how did you decide on the property you're on right now?
Yeah, so actually, it was probably close to a year after the course ended. I actually, believe it or not, after that, I briefly went back to Toronto, and I was like, no, can't do it anymore. And then, back into the cutthroat gigging world, and I was like, oh man, no, not happening. So I got back into gigs and stuff, but after doing what I just done, I couldn't do it. I was done. So anyways, I knew I wanted to build something small and simple, because that's what I can afford. And so I needed to find a township that had no zoning bylaw or unorganized. And that's where I am right now.
Why are the zoning bylaws important? Like, so you can't just buy a piece of land and go out there and build whatever you want? Like, you need to have a certain zoning situation?
Yeah, so for anyone watching who's interested in doing something like this, the first thing you got to do is research the zoning bylaws in the township you're buying it. Because, for example, if you wanted to buy a place in Muskoka, say, which a lot of people in Toronto think about that, and to them that's north, and there's a lot of woods there, and it's great. So I actually looked in Muskoka too, but there's a lot of rules. Like, there's a minimum size for places you have to build. And some places have it. So it's like, okay, great. You bought your piece of land. You must now build at minimum 1,200 square foot place. It must have a septic system. It must be on hydro, So there are still some townships around, usually in the more remote areas of Ontario, that have no zoning bylaws of any kind, because there's no municipal council really governing the place. They haven't really drafted anything yet. So you're legally allowed to, as long as it's within as long as you're following building codes and safety, you can build whatever size of place you want to build. And you can have animals if you want. Technically, you can start a strip club if you want in the middle of the woods because there's no law saying you don't have to if you really want it. So no zoning bylaw is what you're after.
Nice. Oh my God. Well, geez, I did not know that. So you found a township that did not have a town council.
There was a council. It was relatively new from what I understand, and they just hadn't got around to putting in zoning bylaws yet. But after they heard me chainsawing away for months on end, the next year the zoning bylaws were pushed forward, so I just made the cut.
No way, really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So are most of these zoning bylaws, they don't want people building super small structures? Is that what it is?
This is a whole can of worms. I mean, that's part of it. They don't. It seems like a lot of townships don't want because there's kind of this like presentation piece when you enter a town. They don't want it to look like beaten up and slummy, you know. But it is kind of insulting to the people that live out in these areas because they aren't beaten up or slummy people. They have a different aesthetic. Like they just, you know. But anyway, that's kind of what I think it prevents, or tries to control. And I think partly, I have a hunch that, like, you know, here's the totally other can of worms. I kind of think that the rich rule the world, not really governments, and the governments and municipal governments and all that answer to the rich. And as long as people are building big houses with all kinds of bells and whistles, they're paying all these contractors and all these manufacturers, the money is flowing big time. So they're, you know, it seems like the building codes themselves are geared towards helping out the wealthy corporations, basically. And you can't just throw up a 10 by 10 and live in it because the rich people won't get their money for it, you know?
Yeah. I can imagine a lot of them will be oriented towards economic development, what maximizes economic development, not necessarily what is in the best interest of the average person, unfortunately.
Well said.
So I'm not surprised, man, especially in a place like Muskoka, because you know, this winter I was actually looking at some properties up there, and I'm like, wow, you can find some sweet bush lots up there in Muskoka proper, right? That are surrounded by crown land, and they look amazing. But then talking to some of the real estate agents, they're like, yeah, you basically can't build anything on these properties. You know, you could basically build, I think the one guy said you could build like a 10 by 10 foot structure, which is essentially like, you know, a hunting cabin, but you couldn't do anything else. So it's interesting. And I don't think you couldn't even necessarily, you know, put in solar or do any of these kind of or sink a well. There's a lot of restrictions. So I was surprised. I'm like, man, that's the Canadian dream, right? Like you should be able to go out there and buy a property and build whatever the hell you want. Like that's freedom, right? So it's really interesting to hear you say that, man. So you found this. Can you say where you are, like roughly? Are you like in relation to Algonquin Park, or you know, like where are you roughly?
Yeah, I'm on the eastern side of Algonquin Park.
The eastern side of Algonquin Park. Okay.
Yes.
So between like the park and the Ottawa River.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm out there. Yeah, so I found a place. Yeah, like I found a township. It's not like where I am isn't true wilderness. Like I'm not floatplane access only. You know what I mean? And there are some neighbors around and stuff, but you know, it's a very remote area in general. Like, you know, it's 45 minutes to get to any town of 3,000 people or whatever. So it's pretty remote. Yeah. If I walk a mile in any direction from here, yeah, you can get lost pretty bad. So,
that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it what kind of road is it? Do you have like gravel road access, or is it like an ATV trail, or how do you get into that property?
I'm actually on a paved road, believe it or not. I'm on a paved road.
Nice.
Yes. And it's funny, like on this note too, after all said and done, I wish I was actually even more remote than I am.
Really?
Because, yeah, like, not that I hate people or anything. Like, the funny thing is, a lot of people get the impression that, oh, you want to be away from everybody. What do you have against us? It's like, no, it's not like that, man. It's, people are great, but I love, because I've done so much outdoor stuff and I've lived like I know baseline of the woods well, like bird songs and all the rest of it. I love that, and
Yeah.
it's hard to find that. And even if you have a couple neighbors around in the country or in the woods, neighbors out here are generally louder because everyone's got 10,000 small engines, right? So it's almost louder than the city sometimes, you know, in a way, because everybody's working on their engines. They got snowmobiles, they've got chainsaws, they've got ATVs, riding lawnmowers, and on it goes. Yeah.
That's funny, man. That's funny.
It-
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
maybe that's going to change over the next decade or so as, you know, a lot of this stuff becomes electrified. That might help to make it quieter. Because I know, like,
Oh,
I've been using an electric chainsaw now for about 3 years, and it's a lot quieter than a
nice.
gas chainsaw. It's so much easier to take care of, obviously, right? You don't need to winterize it. You don't need to do any of this kind of stuff. But still, like, when it's cutting wood, it's still going to be noisy, right? But it's still a lot quieter than having a gas chainsaw. But then there's other things like, you know, there's a company called Taiga Motors in Montreal that has an electric snowmobile now. So, and as you know, snowmobiles, you can hear them from kilometers away,
Oh,
right?
oh
On
yeah.
the snowmobile tracks in central Ontario, because they snake, you know, through a lot of
Oh,
different places. So
yeah.
I think it's going to be good. Like a lot of these small engines are going to be disappearing, you know, internal combustion ones. So hopefully that'll quiet things down. It's really interesting what you said about, you know, people think that you're trying to get away from everybody into complete silence, but what you feel is that it's a different kind of connection. You're not trying to disconnect yourself from the world. You're trying to connect yourself with something else other than people in a big city, right? And I think a lot of people do have a difficulty understanding that. And that's what attracts me to wilderness, right? Camping, being at my family cottage, that kind of stuff, is that it's a completely different kind of connection. You don't feel empty at all. If anything, you feel more full and more satisfied, but it's just a different kind of connection. So that's really interesting. And like, how often do you see people, would you say? Well, actually, before we get into that, let's just close off on how did you find this property? Like, how big is the property? You know, what was that process?
Yeah, so it's again, I wanted to get something that I could afford, like with my savings, which wasn't very big, you know. So I could afford, you know, I got a small piece of land. Really, it's only an acre and a half. It's tiny. I border a large privately owned forest, which is really nice. And then in this area, there's tons of crown land. So I mean, it's just everywhere. There's more. This township is just all crown land, basically. It's crazy. Like, so it's pretty cool for that in that respect. So owning even a little piece of land out here, you can travel anywhere whenever you want, like in the woods, and it's no one's around. Uh, and you know, at first, like I had that dream of like a big piece of land, and I'm kind of glad I started small here because 1.5 acres is a lot of work. Like I don't have I don't have an ATV. I cut trees down and I just kind of drag them. Like it's pretty primal, but um, like it's tons of work. It's tons of work. Even if I had an ATV, like this was just like total trees. There's nothing here but trees. So um, you we can talk about this later too, but you know, you can cut trees in a way that's actually beneficial for the landscape, and that's what I try and do. So even in doing that, like it's tons of work. It's constant work. An acre and a half. So owning more than that is, I'm glad I started here because it's a good it's been a good education, you know, just in practical terms. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah,
for sure, man. Because I know, like, people say to me sometimes, yeah, the dream is to have, you know, 300 acres or whatever, surrounded by crown land, right? Those are the kind of properties that I was looking at. But at the same time, like you said, if you have access to crown land, and I think 75% of the province is crown land, it's kind of also a waste sinking that much money into private property when you have so much access, right, to other land out there. So that makes sense.
yeah. And the other thing I've learned too is that I kind of see this place as a bit of a starter, if you will, because um, I would love to own more land because I could do more with it. You know, I could instead of buying so firewood each year, I could just cut my own every year, kind of thing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like this is my training ground, so to speak, for an even more remote spot in the future, where I can hopefully live full time and raise kids. You know, that's kind of what I'm gearing up towards. So this has been a great. This has really been my learning at the end of the day.
Totally, man. Yeah, yeah. Well, so you're on an acre and a half, and did you end up finding this listing online, or did you have to get a local like real estate agent? How did that work?
I just found it online. That was it. Yep. Simple as that. Uh, and and I bought it. So yeah.
Nice. And did you
Yeah.
have to make like how was it? Did you just buy it at asking price, or did you like there multiple offers, or how did that work?
Uh, you know, pre-COVID, there wasn't a whole lot of interest up here. So uh, I think I got maybe 3 or 4 grand off the asking price, something like that. Um,
Nice.
and yeah, we're not talking a ton of money. Like I think I paid 22,000 for it. And then I had enough left to buy the materials for this place. Like, of course, the logs were free because they're here. But there's the roof, there's the foundation stuff, and there's everything else, and it adds up pretty fast. So I needed a place that I could afford all that and not be begging anybody for money, right? So yeah, it worked out in that sense.
Nice, man. Nice. And so once you had
Yeah.
the property in hand, how did you decide the design of the place? Like, how did you research that? Were you watching YouTube videos? Did you sketch it out yourself? Did you hire an architect? Like, how did you choose the final design of this place?
Well, originally I legit just wanted a 10 by 10, which is so small. I and luckily the guy who helped me out, Larry, he he convinced me to go bigger. Thank God, because yeah, like 10 by 10 is way too small. I'm in 10 by 24 in this main part here. You can see it's goes back a ways and up a ways up there.
Oh, wow.
So it's nice and roomy. 10 by 10 would literally just be like this side, and that's it. It's so small. So with the design, I had a kind of a vague idea. I knew I wanted to be log and I knew I wanted to be small. And then me and Larry, the hard-headed Newfoundlander that helped me out with this, he helped me fill in the gaps, and we came up with this. And another thing too to note, like I didn't set out to follow a trend. Like a lot of people, it's kind of a hot TikTok debate. Is like, oh, is that really a tiny home or is it a cabin? It's like I don't actually really care, but you can call it whatever you want. I mean, to me, it's a tiny home because like when I think of a cabin, I tend to think of like something that's thrown up in a weekend over a case of beer with some guys, 2x4s, but this functions as a house. It's everything I need in it. And it's 550 square feet. It's really small, and that's all I need. So call it what you want. But yeah, I wasn't following a specific layout. I was picking the brain of somebody who knew what they were doing and going with a small budget and with logs. So just kind of went for it. It was very not planned.
Got it.
Yeah.
But you did decide like it's going to be 10 by 24. The rough like layout of the base. And then did you also decide how tall it was going to be beforehand? Like that looks like a very tall ceiling that you have there.
It is, yeah. So for who's watching, yeah, it's way up there. Skylight up there too.
Oh, dang. Skylight, man. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. You need a skylight if you're off the grid. It just helps with the lights. With the, power consumption part. Yeah, it's very tall. If you're in a small space, having a very tall building, I think this is like 15 feet to the peak of the ceiling there, 14 or 15 feet up. It makes it feel bigger, and it's super. I'm really glad we went with that. And yeah, that was kind of again experience on my buddy's end talking. So yeah, going tall really helps if you're going small.
Yeah.
That way.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Well, so the first thing I guess you had to build was the foundation, right? How did you choose the location for the cabin on your property, and how was is the foundation just cinder blocks that this is all resting on top of, or how does that work?
So the whole approach with this was dead simple. I didn't overthink anything, and so the location was the spot that had the least trees on it. So that was the location for it. There's like the least amount of trees here in the way, so we're gonna go right here. And it was just naturally kind of flat, so that helped out. And that's how I picked it. And it's a floating foundation, but it's not just cinder blocks. Like cinder block, ugh, that's pretty old school these days. Like cottages from like the 70s and stuff, they'll be on cinder blocks. Or if you just want a really rustic spot, you don't really care, use cinder blocks and it works. But it is floating, so meaning it's on top of the ground. It's dug in maybe a foot, but it's on a really heavy duty cottage pad that thick. So it's a big square thing. Then a deck block on top of that, which is really thick again. And then it's a 6x6 beam. And so the whole bottom of the building is just like a framework of 6x6 pressure treated beams. So, beams of wood about that thick.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's actually heavy duty. Yeah. It's heavy duty for being a, not a house.
Yeah. How did
Yeah.
you level that in the construction? Were you using other things like gravel beneath that to keep it level, or is it just naturally lying on the ground? Like, is there a bit of a tilt to it? How does that work?
Yeah. So the ground was, once you get into these small areas, it's pretty awesome. Everyone is super self-reliant because there's not a lot of services around at all. You have to go so far. So people become super self-reliant. So people own things like little bulldozers. So I had a guy, like an old guy, that owned one. He just rolled that thing in here and kind of flattened it for me for very little money, and laid some gravel on it that I had bought off of the same guy who owned a gravel pit. So yeah, and it took like 2 hours or something, and that was done. It was done, like.
No way.
Yeah.
How did you meet this guy, and like that old newfie guy that was helping you? How did you meet these people?
Yeah, when you do go to town, you get to know people pretty quick. They kind of figure, who's this new guy, and you get talking to them. And I've played gigs at little places around here too, which got me kind of to know the community pretty well. So that was actually really the main thing. I was the guy that played music, so I got to know people pretty quickly that way. And yeah, and the cool thing about these small areas again is that everybody just knows how to do stuff like that. Like, and I've kind of become that way myself. Like I'm kind of surprised. I was someone that, for example, I used to look at a breaker panel like when I was growing up in my house, and it was like this alien thing on the wall that only the most qualified, gifted people can touch, right? And I set my own up because I had good advice, and I was like, it's really just the same thing over and over again, and it works great. So I could do that now, like, so in these areas, you meet all kinds of people that know how to do stuff, and they actually enjoy it too. So
Yeah.
It worked out in that sense. Yeah. And
Well,
another thing, I was just going to say, the guy who helped me out a lot, this is a really old school way of doing things, but we just traded hours. I hardly paid him money. I just hopped on about, I don't know, felt like 100 different roofs with the guy, and I did roofing with him in exchange for him helping me here. So that's part of the story of the cabin as well. It's like I was on a lot of roofs with him, and he gave me back every single hour for hour. So
that's awesome, man. Hour for hour.
Yeah.
I like how that works.
Yeah.
Well, what did you do for the log? So like once you set the foundation with those pressure treated 6x6s, which I assume you just bought from the local lumber yard, and then they dropped off on the property. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I don't have a driveway that comes all the way in here. I actually had to walk them all in. So yeah, I walked them all in.
Those are heavy suckers, man. I've held one of those things before. That's pretty friggin' heavy. What about, so once you have the foundation down, for the rest of like the walls and the rest of the structure, including the roof, that was all from logs that you felled on the property and then quote unquote skinned, or what's the proper term for using that, that two-handed metal contraption to take the bark off?
Yeah. So skinned works. Peeling is another one. Log peeling.
Peeling. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, draw knife is a little tool. Now it is kind of built like a house in a sense. Like, so for those of you who are watching this, like, the logs are just straight up trees, and they're the walls. They make up the walls. There's probably about 50. I probably cut 50 trees down for this place.
Wow.
Which sounds like a lot, but if you're in the thick woods, that doesn't even make a dent. And at the end of the day, it helps out healthier trees that are going to last a long time anyways. And then there's little things like if, on all the windows up there, like all the little things like the curtain rods are all branches that I cut. And yeah, so there's a lot of little things made out of logs too, but the actual roof itself is lumber, so I could insulate it and make it a nice, comfy year-round thing. So it's insulated like a house. It's 2x10s on top of the roof, and it's really well insulated.
No way, man. So just the roof is insulated.
The floor is insulated as well. Yeah, it's
floor. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very warm and cozy in here year-round. Yeah, it's a cozy spot, and I'm glad we did it that way. Like, I love the purist idea of it as well, but given the fact that this was my first cabin, like, survival comes into play. Like, it was my first time doing it. I cut all the trees and I was ready to go, and the guy that was helping me, he was more comfortable with doing the traditionally framed roof, so I was like, you know what, that sounds great, let's do that. So it's like survival. It's like, the purist idea sounds wonderful, but I got to get into this cabin now, so let's do that.
Yeah. Totally, man. Yeah, I can understand that. Doing it for the first time, you're like, I just want to be conservative. I don't want to wake up dead, frozen in my bed one morning in January if I miscalculate this. Well, one cool thing is I found this company called Havelock Wool. I believe they're based somewhere in the United States, and they literally make insulation out of sheep's wool. Instead of using whatever the spray and stuff or the blocks of foam. So it's a cool sort of natural alternative that, if it breaks down over time or if the house ever, collapses or needs to be recycled, it's just a natural material. So it's really cool. My family's actually looking at insulating the bottom of our cottage with that Havelock wool, because the cottage is just like over a boathouse. So there's no insulation whatsoever. And especially in the colder months, like the cold just shoots right through the floorboards, which, I don't mind that much, but for the other people and, visitors and stuff, it's not the best. So yeah, insulation is definitely an interesting factor. But you can get, for people who are wanting to do it the natural way, it's like, well, sheep's wool, that kind of is a natural way, to do it, which is interesting. But I understand like the hardcore way is just to do nothing, basically, right? But
yeah, it's either do nothing or a true, old school way would be using moss, like a living roof. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah. Like a green roof. Yeah, some kind of green roof is great insulator. And the classic Alone in the Wilderness series with Dick Proenneke up in Alaska that built his own cabin.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out if you haven't. He did that, and he lived there for 30 years. And he had a roof made out of moss. And it keeps you warm.
That's awesome, man. Nature's insulation. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I recently went camping and I made a bushcraft shelter, and that's what I put on the back of the shelter, right? It was just like a lean-to, and on the back of the lean-to, I covered it with moss, and it worked like a charm, man. Worked like a charm. So you had to peel all the trees, you had to cut down the trees, and the trees you're using, were you trying to use, can you only use hardwoods for doing that kind of thing, or can you use softwoods as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So from what I understand, it's better to use softwood because if you look at when you cut through a tree and you're looking at the end of the log, the grains, each layer of wood within the tree, each ring, is more porous in a softwood, meaning there's more air gaps trapped in the wood, and it's more insulating that way. In a hardwood tree, like an oak or a maple or a beech, they're like rock, so the cold just permeates straight through it, and it's harder to heat it, keep them warm. So it's actually better to use softwood for that reason. And softwood in general tend to grow straighter than hardwoods.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they're easier to work with.
Interesting, man. Yeah, it's all about that, the pockets of air, I guess, right? Because even when you're thinking about jackets and stuff, or down, it's all about the air that's trapped between, I guess, the fibers and the feathers of the down, right? So that's very interesting. So softwood, and then also the straightness. I can't think of a single like oak tree or maple that I've ever seen in my entire life that it's just a straight shot to the sky, right? But you see a lot of pines, right, that are. So that makes a lot of sense, man. That's very interesting. And then you can see in the wall behind you, what is
Yeah.
the caulking that you put between the logs?
Yeah. So it's called chinking, actually, which is kind of a slightly racist term or whatever you want to say. But anyways, it's called chinking. But it's there's a couple different materials you can use for it.
Yeah.
The really old way is to use oakum, which is what they used to chink boats with back in the day, which I think it's kind of like a wool oakum. And then another material that's been used for this traditionally has been lime, crushed lime, cement, and mine's a bit of a more modern one just because a lot of the logs I cut were kind of green still because I needed more than I thought I did, and I cut some last minute to throw them up in the cabin. So because I knew there was going to be more shrinking involved, I got, this is acrylic based chinking. So it's called permachink actually. And Canada Log Homes sells it. And, it moves with the logs, you know, as they shrink and all that stuff. So it's a bit pricier, but and it's the most annoying job in the world to do. But I'm almost finished it all now. So
That's crazy, man. Yeah, I can imagine it taking a long time to put all that chinking in there. What is the alternative? Like back in the day before synthetic materials, what would people use to do that? Is it pine tar? Is that what they'd use? Like would they push in pieces of moss or something and then put the pine tar over top, or how did that work?
From what I've gathered, it's strictly just the moss and leave it alone.
Wow, no
That's
way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, more maintenance. Eventually, you know, the moss would probably, uh, you know, dry up and whatever. But so you'd have to replace it. But moss works, and yeah, wool would probably. I'm sure there's people who have chinked cabins with wool as well. But I know moss for a fact has been one. And yeah, whatever keeps the air out really, and that's somewhat insulating is what works. Yeah.
Wow, man, that is so cool. So once you got, and like, how long did it take to construct from the foundation to the roof? How long did that whole process take you? You said you were sleeping in a tent for 9 months while this was going on?
That is correct. Yeah, so I got here in my winter tent on this piece of land and started cutting trees. And my winter tent is like a canvas tent with a wood stove in it, so it was actually pretty cozy. And I was cutting trees, and I got a local gig, and I was making some money at the local gig that I drive to every once in a while. So that was keeping me, you know, keeping groceries coming in. And
music? Was that music or?
yes, yeah, I was playing a gig around, and then I got into my summer tent as the weather warmed up, and I actually had a summer gig playing on the Muskoka cruise steamboats on Gravenhurst.
Okay.
Quite a hike
Nice.
from here. Quite a hike from here, but I remember coming back to my tent in my dress clothes at like midnight, you know, like in a damp tent. Like it was just crazy. And I was so green at all this, so naive and all that stuff. Like all my belongings were in Rubbermaid bins under tarps. And of course mice got in them. And then I eventually built a shed, like, you know, but at first I just had tarps with my Rubbermaid bins. And to cool food, I dug down and put a cooler in the ground a bit and covered it with logs. And I had a dining tent set up to get out of the bugs. And yeah, I lived that lifestyle for a good 9 months, with the odd break in between. Like there's another resort I used to play at that would let me stay over once in a while, and I'd get a nice hot shower and some free food that I'd have to cook over a fire, you know. So that was pretty great. So it was kind of this weird meeting of world extremes. And but yeah, it was a very rustic living for 9 months. I was peeling and cutting for a lot of that time, and because I had to work and stuff, I couldn't do it all at once. I was kind of like puttering away. And by the time September rolled around, we got the foundation done, and then we started putting the walls up. And I think by mid-November, the shell itself was up. And that's when I could crawl in there and with a wood stove and, you know, actually be in it. So from like March to November. Yeah.
Holy cow, man. It was insane.
Yeah.
And living in a tent the entire time. What kind of tent was it? Was it like one of those canvas tents you get at Cabela's? You know, like one of those hunting tents, or?
Yeah, I used a snow checker, they're called.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lightweight, heavy duty canvas tent, really steep pitch, and a lightweight wood stove. And yeah, I love that thing.
That
Yeah,
is amazing, man. Holy cow. And you're able to keep your food cold and you had a separate food tent that you go and eat in. I'd imagine, just my experience from, camping, the toughest months are June, July, August, or May, June, July, right? Because of the bugs, the mosquitoes and
absolutely.
the black flies and the horse flies. And like when you're camping, if you have sufficient netting on, it's not a problem, right? You can get around that. At least, I feel that way. But if you're in that 24/7, like, did you have bug netting on pretty much all the time you were outside? Or did you
Oh
just
yeah,
like, oh yeah, okay.
yeah. Uh, and to add to the messiness, you're out there in June peeling logs and the sap coming out of them, because I use balsam fir and they're full of gum and sap and sticky water and everything. Like you're sitting on a log peeling it and you're getting the sap all over you and there's bugs all over you. They're getting stuck to it. And it's just like, it's rough. Yeah, it's rough.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But I mean, it to me, and obviously to you, it's worth it. It's just like the price you
Yes,
pay. It's the price you pay for being out there in June, July, and August, right?
that's it. Yeah. June is particularly nasty, but
Yeah,
it, yeah, it is worth it. It's pick your poison. Wherever you go, there's going to be something you can complain about, whether it's a city or the woods or wherever. So that's the thing up here is the bugs. Yeah.
absolutely, man. So wow, okay. So that whole process was 9 months. You were living in your tent while doing that, doing some gigs on the side while you could. And you once you got it like basically the structure up, what was the next toughest thing to do? Was it the wiring and your solar panels, or what was next?
Wow. Yeah. So once again, I was very naive and very beginner at all this, and it's very true. Like the quickest part was putting up the shell. Of any house, the quickest thing it really is like the framing, and the finishing work takes as long or way longer. I'm still pecking away at things. Chinking takes forever to get it to make it look just right, because it's
Yeah,
very specific, very specific texture. You got it. You don't want to make it look wrong, and it's messy, and it's that took forever. And the wiring wasn't so bad. Um, but then there's staining, there's putting in the flooring, and oh man, yeah, like the one that sticks out to me really would be all the chinking after. And the way to get around that, if you're interested in building with log, is to just use bigger logs, because then there's less lines to make. Simple as that. Uh,
totally.
but yeah,
What's the difficulty spot though if you're using bigger logs? Like how do you when you're putting the logs, you're putting them in place on the walls. Is that a two person job, or can you do it by yourself if you have like pulleys, or like how did you do that?
yeah. So there's like pulley systems you can rig up. Um, all of mine, since it's a small place and they were dried out pretty well, like when balsam dries, it's you can toss it around. It's super light. Um, so a lot of them, it took two of us to haul them around, some heavy duty straps. And uh, the others, one day we enlisted like country neighbors from around to come help us lift everything by hand. The top ones, they were hard, they were heavy, and they were green. I remember green logs. Uh,
Man, that's
and it,
hilarious. I just watched the film. I just watched the Harrison Ford and Kelly McGillis film Witness. Have you seen that film?
I no, I don't think so. Nope.
Okay, so he goes. I won't give too much of it away, but he's a cop. And he ends up living in an Amish community, and there's a scene where this newly new couple, after their wedding, they're building a barn on their property, and the entire community comes together, right, and helps them build the barn for free. Although with the expectation, right, that anything like this happens in your own life, the whole community will come to your property and help you do that. So when
Yep.
you were getting those people to help you out, was it this kind of like country manners that it's like, listen, if you need help for a few hours, we'll come, and we expect the same of you? Is it that kind of reciprocity, or?
Yeah, that is kind of uh, the undertone. I mean, especially with my main helper, Larry, I always help him with his wood every year. Uh, there's a term used up in the country in rural Canada, being a wood bee. You're doing a wood bee, uh, BEE, that is. So every time somebody has to cut all their wood, everybody goes. And then when it's the other person's turn, everybody goes. When it's the other person's turn, everybody goes. So that's still pretty alive and well in rural areas, you know. Though it's not as much as it used to be, but it is still a thing. Yeah.
That's so cool, man. Because honestly, like in the city, that's one of the things. Like when I was watching the film Witness the other day, I'm like, Jesus, man. Growing up in Toronto, that kind of thing never would really happen, right? Like the idea of, you know, someone's building something in the back, even though it doesn't happen that often, right, in the city, but just the idea of dropping what you're doing and going to someone else's place and helping them with something for like 2 or 3 hours, that would just never happen in Toronto, you know? So that's so cool that even though it's happening less in the country, like in you know, east of Algonquin Park where you are, it's so cool that that kind of thing still goes on. And it's almost also a bit of a necessity because you do, like you said, it's so much work even taking care of an acre and a half. There's just a lot of stuff to do there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you have to do it. You have to rely on yourself. So it's kind of interesting dynamic. But sorry, yeah, that's really cool, man. So after that, yeah, like doing the solar panels. Did you know from the beginning that you were going to do solar panels, or how did that work?
Oh yeah, oh, the solar journey has been hilarious because I mean, again, uh, I was very beginner to all this, so I thought, oh well, easy. You just buy some solar panels, you hook them up, put them on the roof, and you get lots of power. Easy as that. Why doesn't everyone do this? And I quickly learned that you need a really great spot to get like solar all the time in Canada. Like it's got to be a Canada. Like I mean, I I remember being up in Yellowknife on one of the houseboats, and they're all off grid. They're all on solar power there. I had better solar on that houseboat in Yellowknife than I have here in the winter because their solar panels are faced over a lake facing south, and there's nothing blocking their view for miles. And the it's a very dry climate, so they don't get a lot of snow, a lot of hazy days up there. They had great solar in the winter compared to me. I got a lot of hazy days here and a lot of snow, a lot of precipitation, and I'm on a bit of a north-facing slope. Though I am facing south, I'm slightly, just ever so slightly facing north, and that makes a huge difference, especially when there's trees in front of you.
Yeah, big time.
So yeah, so I've been, you know, I've been messing around with where I'm putting my panels and all this stuff a lot. I've changed the setup so many times, and I think the answer now is getting a wind generator as well. And in Canada, you absolutely need a backup generator no matter where you are. And right now they're gasoline powered, unfortunately. You know, the ironic thing about living off the grid, you want to be all environmentally friendly, is you end up using a lot of gas, either for your generator, for your chainsaw or whatever, or your car. You know, for those of us who, you know, like I can't afford an electric car, for example, so I got a van. I got a gas powered guzzling van. So you end up using quite a bit of gasoline. And I definitely need my generator this time of year for solar. There's no question about it. I get really good solar from March until November, but November until March, she's pretty low.
Oh yeah. So are you storing that energy, or are you just taking it straight from the panels? Like, is it just there's no storage component to that?
I do have so the way solar works is that you eventually, like, the powers a battery bank that you have, and that is your storage piece. And my storage capacity isn't huge. And especially if your batteries aren't getting charged a lot during the day, they don't want to hold a lot. But if they're topped up for hours all day, they tend to hold more, retain a lot of that. So in the summertime, I never have to use my generator really. But when I run my generator now, I have a battery charger hooked up to it. So it's always charging the batteries. And then, so I only have to run it like 2 hours a day, tops. Sometimes just an hour a day. I turn it on, turn it off. And it gives my batteries enough charge so that they stay above 50%. And they're AGMs. So, I mean, lithiums now, that's all the rage with batteries right now. The technology is changing like crazy by the second, it seems. So
Yeah.
they can take way more of a hit. I wish I had lithium batteries because you can take them down to 20% and they don't have a memory. The cells don't have a memory. So you could beat those things up. They last forever, you know?
Totally, man. So when you said AGM, is that like nickel cadmium, or what does that mean?
It means, stands for absorbent glass mat. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, before lithium came around, they're kind of all the rage in terms of how good they were. They have their benefits. They're really heavy, like traditional batteries are, but they don't really produce much of an off gas, like the lead acid ones do. And they're sealed. They don't require any maintenance. You can put them on their side or whatever. Like there's no liquid in them. It's like a gel material, from what I understand. And yeah, but they can only take 50% of a what's the word, of a draw, I guess, once they go there below 50% of their state of charge, they start to lose their performance abilities. So that is the drawback. Batteries are, for those listening, like solar power is a great idea. It's still in the analog stages of the technology. There's still a lot of maintenance, and it's still very expensive to get it set up. Like that's the reality of it. Like one lithium battery is like $1,000, you know, and it's crazy. In order to make it work for yourself, you have to learn how to use less power in general. That's the whole key to it all. If you want to really, stick it to the man and not pay your hydro bill and save on all the costs, like you got to use less power and have less of a battery power bank.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Yeah, my cousin, he's also an off-gridder near Bancroft, and
Oh yeah.
he has more of a traditionally constructed house. It's not a a wood house like you've constructed yourself from the trees on your own property and whatnot. But with him, his solar panels are actually off the roof, and they're like he's basically cleared like a little whatever half or quarter acre field, and I think they're tilted slightly for optimization. And then his battery bank is also, I believe, AGM, like you mentioned. And it was unfortunate because he just got himself set up on all the AGM stuff just as like the Tesla Powerwalls were coming out into Canada, right? I think like it was the Tesla Powerwall 2, which is lithium ion, right? And you can basically, with one of those things, and they're not that expensive either, because they're producing at such massive volume now at Tesla. I believe they're $4,500. For one unit. And I think most houses can run on one. If you're a bigger power user, you might have to get two or sometimes three of them, depending on the situation, right? But people, and they're really designed too to be used with the Tesla shingles, the ones that they're just launching to the market right now. I think there's 4 different ones, right? There's ones that look like terracotta, there's ones that look like metal, et cetera. But that way, the entire surface area of your roof is absorbing electricity all the time. But because I think another big factor with the solar, right, is what is the square footage that you have? Because you're limited also with a tinier roof, right? You're limited with how much space you have up there. Because I saw there's a video of you on your Instagram or your TikTok where you're cleaning the snow off the panels, right? Because you have to keep them clear, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like it's a lot of maintenance. With solar, you got to keep them clear, and you have to make sure solar really starts before you even buy a piece of land. You got to make sure the land you buy is great for solar.
Yeah,
that's when the solar journey starts. Because it's a whole other world. One that's really fascinating, like renewable energy. A lot of factors have to be in just the right spot for it to work well. I've learned, like it's a struggle, especially I'm doing it on my own. I figured it out by myself. Like if, I wish I had somebody that really knew their stuff help me right from the beginning, but I didn't. So I've gone through the ringer. With solar has, kicked my ass quite a bit, to be honest with you. But it's starting to work with me as opposed to against me now. Yeah.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, what about so you want to put a little windmill or wind generation set up as well to complement the solar to try to expand your output, especially in the winter months.
Yes.
Is that something you think you're going to be doing soon?
I hope so. Yeah, I'm seriously looking into it right now. The beauty of having a little wind turbine is that you can charge up your batteries all night. If there's a windy night, you're getting at least something to the batteries.
Yeah.
Or in a day like today, it's snowing today. The wind's gusting a bit, um, but there's no sun because it's snowing and it's cloudy. So no sun. Well, at least there's wind, so you can get something. Uh, I really believe in yeah, this region of the world, you need a variety of things. You can't depend on solar alone. We're not in New Mexico or Arizona, like we're not totally in a desert. So you have to get creative. You have to get creative if you don't want to go with hydro.
Totally, man. Totally. Well, that's it. It's also kind of like a redundancy thing, if you have two sources of power, just in case one goes down for whatever reason, or like you said, if one is, going higher or lower in terms of their output. I'm seeing a comment from one of the viewers. One of our viewers is actually a solar installer guy in Idaho. So I got to talk about that later on. Yeah, because he does this all the time, right? It's his job. Hey man, what's up? The hunting education guy. I'm forgetting his name, but I got to talk to that guy later on. Yeah, that's really cool, man. I mean, just being able to, just the notion, even if these challenges you're facing, to me, it just seems so fucking cool, to be able to generate your own power like that, whether it's solar or wind. It's just so cool. There's something so romantic in the fact that you're like what you're seeing, what's going on in Texas, right? It's like, wow, in those big, those kind of black swan events, you can feel safe that, listen, I'm self-sufficient, man. I can keep myself going if I need to. So what do you do with, for food, man? Like, do you have freezers and fridges, or do you keep something like, do you have a root cellar or what's going on?
Yeah, so I wish back in the day, another thing that's very handy off grid for people who just need something and they can't get too crazy fancy with all their solar, like in my situation. Propane fridges are awesome. Of course, like, I'm a, I don't love the idea of propane, but if you need something in a pinch, it's a good, cheap, reliable source of energy at the moment, or cheap enough. But I have a 12-volt fridge, which is electric, but because I don't get a lot of power this time of year, I don't really use it. So I keep my stuff kind of like near the door on the porch, so it just stays kind of cold. It's very ghetto, but it is what it is. So that's what I have to do.
Well, the bears are asleep too, right? So you don't got to worry.
Yeah, that's true.
Worry. Speaking of bears, man, side tangent on wildlife. What do you see up there? Because if I had to guess, like between the Ottawa River and the Algonquin Park, you're going to be there's going to be moose, there could be Algonquin wolves, there could be obviously white-tailed deer. There's even elk in the Bancroft area. That's more to the south. I don't know if it's as far north as where you are, but like what do you see up there?
Basically anything you could imagine has walked by my door. Yeah, I've had like actually a couple weeks ago wolf tracks straight past the door, which was awesome.
Awesome.
I've had a mother and a cub bear living nearby in a couple apple trees that are close to here. And I've had every kind of owl perch around here at some point, great horn, bard, saw-whet, like there's, like martin, fox. There's a bunch of wild turkeys that roam through here. I walk back through my trail to my van when I got to, hit the road, and grouse pop out of the snow, like, so pretty much everything. It's amazing. And it's only, again, it's a small piece of land, but everything seems to pass through or use it. Moose have walked by, deer have walked by, everything. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's fantastic. Do you have any running water? Are there any is there any running water on your property or close by?
Yes, there was an old dug well that I've used. I have to shut that down in the winter because the pipes are above ground that I've run. It's kind of far. It's, a couple 100 feet from my actual cabin. So I basically use it in the winter and I just haul it by hand, which has been, I guess, a bit of a workout every day. But what I'm actually going to be setting up this spring, which I'm really excited about, is a rainwater harvesting system, which I'm all for. I love that stuff. Like,
cool.
Yeah, I can't wait to get that going. That was my whole idea from the start, but I finally have a window of time to do it this spring, and I am pumped to get that started. Yeah, like
Dude, I'm
yeah.
sorry, man, but if you really want to be hardcore, you have to drink your own urine. That's what you have to do. So if you want to live the off-grid lifestyle, Adam, man, you gotta learn to drink your own urine, man. I'm sorry. That's what you should really be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not that bad, you know, like it is, it won't kill you, so.
But that's cool, man. Yeah, rainwater harvesting. Now, is that the system? Would that just be like your eaves troughs run into a barrel, essentially, or?
So I have half of it set up already, really. Like I've got a cistern on the porch, like a 1,000-liter cistern, plastic.
Yeah.
And it's a water catchment area. And usually I pump the well into there and just draw from there. So what I want to basically just do is run a pipe from my eaves troughs into the cistern. There's a couple extra steps. You have to paint your roof with a certain type of like liquid rubber seal that's NSF approved if you want to be able to drink it. So I'm going to do that first. You run the pipes into your cistern, and then there's a filtration system you got to use in your pipes. And then technically you could drink it once you follow all those steps, which is super exciting. And in the wintertime, if you put that heat wire on your roof, you can actually melt the snow and ice, and there you go. So that's the plan. Yeah, that's the plan.
Even, like, keep the solar panels instead of having to sweep them. I don't know if you can set that up, if you can have it melting, right? If it's melting all around the panels, maybe it's harder for the snow to stay on the panels themselves. I don't know, but
that's a brilliant idea. I never thought of that. Thank you. I'm gonna get into that. I wish I thought of that 3 months ago when the snow was flying. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that might work. I don't know if like the heat would mess up with the solar cells themselves, but yeah, that's interesting about that you have to be careful the chemicals that you use in your system, like on the roof, and because a lot of these sealants and caulks and all these different kind of synthetic materials can just be full of nasty shit that you don't want to be having your food or your water coming in contact with. It's really interesting. Like my family cottage got repainted, the exterior, this summer, and the guy was sanding off some areas, right, to prepare it for the new coat. And I'm seeing him sand it off, and it's getting onto his tarp, and then he's just taking his tarp and he's just like flicking all the stuff into the water, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, what is paint made of? And he's like, oil. And I'm like, so we're taking the oil off the side of the house, into grinding it to tiny particles, and then we're dumping it into the water, which, by the way, like for our cottage, the water source is literally just 10 feet off the dock, right? So I'm like, Jesus Lord, that is so stupid. So I'm like, dude, you cannot dump, the sanding stuff that you're taking off the cottage directly in the water. He's like, you're right. So he started taking his tarp about 2 feet back into the bush and flipping it all there. I'm like, oh God, man. I'm like, no. It's tough because up there, right, people don't really think about this stuff, right? In cottage country, they're just like, whatever, half the time the cottage owners aren't even there when the stuff's going on. But this is not related to your situation directly, but it's indirect, right? So it's like, we need to think about these chemicals that we use that we think are innocuous, but in fact, they can actually have really bad effects. I actually ended up looking at the data, and if you look at like all the microplastic and nanoplastic going into the environment in the world, actually paint is among the top 3 sources. So paint on buildings, paint on cars, right? You think about all these things, paint on ships, right? You think about all these surfaces that we paint, and that as they age and weather, it's all made out of oil, and it's just breaking down into these fine particulates. So obviously, your cottage is your cabin is not painted, but it's just you have to think about these things, right? When you're building these systems for yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So the type, I did use a stain on my logs, but it's a water-based stain.
Nice.
This type of log is known. It's funny. You ask two different people, you get 2 different answers. A lot of people say they'll rot quick, so you got to really stain them to protect the wood. So because it's a natural material, it's not stone. It's going to rot away if you leave it on its own. Yep. And there's another school of thought that thinks, well, it's full of resin and it preserves itself, so whatever. But either way, I put a lot of stain on them, and it's a water-based stain for logs called the company's called Sandsin, and yeah, it's a water-based stain, and it's environmentally friendly according to them. So it's more expensive, but at the end of the day, I'm glad I tried to do something that wasn't throwing oil everywhere. Jeez.
Yeah, man, dude, good for you, man. Good for you. Especially, when you think about this is why like my theory is that the gateway for getting people connected to nature that are not already connected is through food. And one of those things is water, right? Like going out to a spring and collecting water, right, for your home. If you see where your food is coming from, then you have skin in the game to protect, whatever wild landscape that is where it's coming from. So if you're getting water like right off of your roof or, in and around your cabin, you think about those things like, listen, I'm going to pay more money to use a water-based stain on my logs as opposed to an oil-based one. Because, all this shit's going to end up coming off into my water when I'm drinking it, right? So that's great that you did that, man. That's fantastic. And that's a really good point, for people who are thinking about building their own cabins.
Yeah, and something else to note as well is that society doesn't make it very easy for people to be environmentally friendly. Like in my example here, if somebody wanted to buy my place, say, for example, banks will not give out a mortgage to somebody who has a rainwater system. They won't give out a mortgage to somebody who's got a composting toilet. You have to have a septic. And I have no septic. I have a gray water pit, which is different, and I had a professional install that, but it doesn't deal with sewage. My sewage goes into my compost toilet, which I get rid of myself, and it's composted before it hits the environment, so it's actually safe to dispose of. It's not toxic, as long as you're not putting in the water or whatever. But banks, you want to buy a place that has that? Good luck. You won't get a mortgage for it. Apparently, you have to have a septic. You got to have a drilled well. So
really?
There's not much. There's not much incentive for people to be getting too creative and environmentally friendly with places that they want to use as an investment. They want to sell someday, for example.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one note is I think with rural land in Ontario, at least, from my understanding, sometimes banks will not do financing at all, and sometimes banks will do financing, but you have to put down like 50%, right, of the purchase value. So, but you bought your land for cash in your situation. Okay. Cash is king. Cash is king, baby.
The cash is king. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I hear. Yeah. I mean, I did all this for like less than a down payment on what a lot of people would put on a house in the city somewhere, Yeah. So like, dude, it is. Yeah.
You have no idea how many of my friends who are like, people like me who live in the city, but they love the outdoors. They're like, man, the dream is to live in an off-grid cabin. It's like that's the dream. Except, I got to pay off this fucking mortgage, and I'm about to have a kid, and like I have to pay for them. What if they get into Harvard? And there's all this stuff, like you were saying earlier. Once you get into that, once you're living downtown in a city and you start doing all of those things that city people do, it's literally like you become a slave to that lifestyle because you start to accrue all of this debt and this lifestyle that you don't necessarily even like. But the further you go down that road, the more that you become entrenched in that life path, and the more difficult it becomes to do what you do and get out into the fucking bush and be living that wild life.
Yes, and this brings up a really awesome point about life in general. I mean, I love this outlook. It's like, is it comfort you want or is it freedom? Because you can't really have both in like a lot of situations. Like the more comforts you have, the less freedom you have. You got to maintain all those comforts. Like if you want big house, nice car, a lot of bells and whistles in your life in general, you want to be able to eat out all the time, live in a city. That's ultimate in comfort, but you have to work to maintain that, and you have very little freedom. You're exhausted at the end of the day. You go home, and you can't enjoy. Your time is basically gone. You're so. On the other hand, in my case, I have more freedom than comforts. I have a basic level of comforts, but I have more freedom. So like I don't have a lot of the bells. I don't have a microwave. I don't have like a lot of fancy stuff. I have to haul my water every day right now, for example. I don't have a lot of power, but I have some. So I have less comforts, but it's way cheaper to maintain that. So I have a lot more freedom. And freedom to me is the best currency. Like, time is more valuable than money at the end of the day. So when I set
Yeah.
all this up in the first place, I knew that in the back of my mind that like free time is the best. Like you can't, people work their entire lives to have free time. So if I can somehow mess with that equation a little bit and give myself more free time now, I'd rather do that. And I've sacrificed comforts for that, but I have a lot of free time at the moment. And because a lot of the times, like if I work enough in the summer, I'm pretty free to relax in the winter. Like on the other hand, I don't have a wife or kids right now. So that helps too. But just being a single guy, if I put in my time in the summertime and I don't blow all my money, it's very little money to maintain this lifestyle. So I don't have to wake up and stress about being anywhere a lot of the time.
Absolutely, man. That is the ultimate like goal in life, is the freedom of your time, to choose how to spend your time. And a lot of times people have to make a shit ton of money to be able to basically have all their time back. There's so many people that I know that are caught in the cycle where they might even be making, significant amounts of money, but they're also spending it, and they need to continue to sacrifice their time to maintain that life. That's also why I'm an advocate of drinking your own urine, because, like you said, it's very uncomfortable, but it's free, right? So it's perfect. So it fit in perfectly for your life, man.
Oh, I love it, man. You're right. What am I thinking? Like when I get my rainwater system set up, I'm just gonna pee on my roof. I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna pee on my roof, and I'm just gonna use it.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. Please don't invite me over ever to your place. That's true. But yeah, if there's any listeners out there who are looking to escape from the city and get married to our handsome friend Adam here and have babies in the bush, please contact him. He's at Adam RUZZO Music, so you know where to find him. But there's a lot of people, man, that I think would take you up on that offer. Honestly, like there's so many, joking aside, there's so many people would be like, come live in an off-grid cabin? Like, abso-fucking-lutely, I would do that. If you compare that to what a lot of people are doing, it's hard. But most people don't have the skill set, like you said, like being able to live in a tent for 9 months while you're building this place. Like most people would not be able to do that. Like they don't have the skill set, right? They couldn't do it for free. They couldn't do it themselves.
Yeah, this brings up another really interesting point. We've talked about like all the benefits, but like I have had a lot of struggle here, like a lot. To have what I have now, like it's been pure struggle, a lot of it. Like a lot of people I tell the struggles to, they're like, I can't believe you've lasted that long there, because like even this November, I busted my plumbing. My generators was busted, and I had no solar coming in, so I had no power. I had no water. My fridge, of course, wouldn't work because of that, and I had to you just imagine, and just so many things. That's just one little example. And when I fired up my propane backup heater, I installed it myself while the whole place smelled like propane after all those hours of work and not really knowing what I was doing, and so many problems. And when you're on your own and there's no one to help you, like those problems were even bigger in your head, and you have nowhere else, you have no backup place to go to. So there has been a lot of struggle. Don't get me wrong, but I'm finally years into it at a place where I can sit here beside the stove and nothing's broken right now. This is great, but it's taken a lot of struggle and a lot of time. I mean, and if I had money to spend on people to do all this for me, that'd be another story. But in my case, I haven't. I've had, the odd time I did, but most of the time I don't. So I've had to figure it out. And the benefit is I've learned a lifetime of skills, kind of in a couple of years. But it hasn't been necessarily because I've wanted to. I've had a bit of interest to do it, but it's been necessity. And it's I really want to do this, but 20 things are broken right now. So I got to fix them all and not really do what I want to do today. Fun, it's been a lot of that. So it's not all roses. And yes, simple life is not very simple. The simplicity does come from the immense satisfaction you get. Like just sitting here, I just feel so satisfied because, you know, I've done all this, and it's just like this underlying satisfaction you have. You're not going way out into the world doing huge things. You don't really feel the need a lot of the time because you just feel like, oh, this is great. Like, what else could I want? You know, you have that, whether you like it or not, that kind of hits you, and it changes your brain, like in a weird way. So I've had a lot of that sitting in this chair here, and it's pretty cool. And that's what I think people mean by the simple life. But you have to have a lot of kind of practical knowledge and know how to really do it well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure it was a learning curve, man, for sure. But now that you have these talents, these skills, you know, it definitely makes yourself more self-reliant, for sure. So that's, yeah, I can imagine all the struggles, man. It's not all cherry pies and ice cream, for sure.
That's right.
But yeah, that's good to know, man. So you have the composting toilet, you have like a running water system with a sink in your kitchen, and then that's pretty much the only. And then your gray water, you said, like from your sink, goes into your composting toilet, or it goes into a cistern outside. You said you have a gray water pit.
Yep. So my composting toilet is waterless, so that's kind of the beauty of it. All your poop goes into a chamber full of peat moss, and there's a fan running to a hose outside, and it constantly dries it out. You turn it once in a while. There's really no smell. And it's separated from the urine. Once you mix those two together, well, that's where all the fun begins, you know? So you don't want to have that kind of fun in it. You want to keep those separate. So my pee just goes into a separate container, which I dump every once in a while once it gets full. And you mix some vinegar in there and it gets rid of the smell. So the water feeds a shower, which is heated, which is great. I have an on-demand propane heater, which heats the water. And yeah, it runs through a sink as well. And that runs into a gray water pit, which is basically a giant gravel pit surrounded by concrete blocks under the ground. And you just got to make sure you're using, you know, eco-friendly soaps. And as far as you're doing that, you really you have no bad influence on the ground around you. It just kind of dissipates into it and gets back into the soil.
That's awesome.
And that's that. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. I guess so that's what for food. One of the guys, this hunting education guy, this guy I know who's a solar installer in Idaho. He's a big hunter himself. He was asking, do you ever take roadkill? Do you ever take roadkill from around you as a food source, or you know, how do you get your food, man, in general, other than like roadkill, hunting and fishing? You know, where's the nearest supermarket? How do you do all that?
Yeah, I've definitely eaten roadkill before, and it's fantastic. I'll put that one out there. Fishing is another thing I like to do for food as well. And currently, I've been hunting quite a few times, but the problem is that, again, I've had to build everything up slowly. I don't have a huge freezer capacity to store meat. So hunting's been kind of low on the priority list. Other than the odd grouse or, you know, hare. Hunting's not really like, I'm not one of these guys that's like, I only hunt for food. You know, I'm working on getting there, you know, like that's ideal. And, but the practical reality is I don't have a place to store it yet. So that's unfortunate. But
that's key. Yeah, you have to have reliable freezer space. Otherwise,
yes,
it can go to waste in a space of like 12 hours.
Yeah, yeah. I'm giving you like the real, you know, side of DIY here. Yeah. So, yeah, the nearest convenience store that has food, I guess I wouldn't really call it a grocery store, is it's not too far away, and I drive there once in a while and I stock up, and I just kind of, you know, a lot of the times it's kind of just regular food. I cook here and stuff. But yeah, it's a bit of a mixture, but at the moment it's been mostly boring old grocery food. But the dream is to become self-sufficient with gardens and hunting, but it takes a while to get there, I've found. So
totally,
that's a reality. Like, that was my vision, and it's like, oh, here's reality. You can't do that yet because you have no freezer. So
yeah. So what kind of fishing are you doing in the area? Are you doing it in local like lakes that have public access? And what species are you going after? Are you shore fishing? Are you ice fishing? Like, do you have a boat? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, this winter I've been really busy with stuff in the cabin, so I haven't got out on the ice much, but I love just going out in a canoe and getting trout. That's kind of my thing. I love doing that, and I'll kind of eat whatever I
Brook trout?
catch.
Brook
Yeah,
trout?
brook trout and lake trout too. Yeah, there's some lakes around that have good lake trout here too. And yeah, so I do that in the summers, and um, yeah, just out of canoe. I know the spots, so I'll check them out every once in a while. Again, the goal is to like, you know, the other reality is that because like for work and stuff, music's my thing. I have to put a certain amount of time to that. Hunting and fishing, like that's a lot of time too. So sometimes I can't dedicate as much time to that as I'd like. Uh, so it's a balance of trying to find, you know, I'm still trying to find that balance there. So, but you're reminding me, a couple of years back, I actually worked in Algonquin Park as a warden in the backcountry, and I lived out there for like basically six months, 7 months, something like that.
While you
And
had the cabin, or this was before the cabin?
while I had the cabin, so I lived in a tent while I had my cabin built. Go figure. And yeah, there's great fishing out there too.
I can imagine, man. I can imagine.
Yeah,
Like lakes that get little, very little fishing pressure. Um,
yeah.
so were you like a game warden there, or what, like a ranger though? You said you were a ranger. So like patrolling, this is human focused stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was a warden, so
Warden.
it's like a kind of a glorified ranger. I'd be go out there with another guy, and we cleared the trails and we cleaned up the campsites and we talked to people and checked their permits whenever we saw them. And yeah, it was an awesome job. Like, yeah, you basically lived on the trail, you know. And when I wasn't on the trail, I went and lived on my boss's property in another tent. So lived in a lot of tents, man. Yeah.
Hey, that's a good
Yeah.
skill to have, dude. That's a good skill to have. Well, so you did that, like, that was to earn some cash in the wintertime, or that's something you just wanted to do, like, to see what it was like, period?
That was actually a summer job I had in 2018. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It just kind of happened because once you get to know people in the Algonquin Park area, you kind of get into that world a bit, and you meet the right people, and then you can kind of, you know, they saw I could use a chainsaw, and that I could live like this. And literally, this was my stepping stone to getting an awesome job like that. And I gave it a go for like it was great, but you know, yeah, I'm kind of an odd case because like I do like my freedom, and that job, as freeing as that job sounds and is, it's still like that's music festival season too and stuff like that, and gig season. So you know, and
Yeah.
this brings up another interesting point too. When you live this way long enough, and you're able to make enough money and not need a lot, the thought of working anywhere just kind of bothers you after a while because you're like so self-sufficient here. Another source of income I've had is just Airbnb this place and camping somewhere, and that's been awesome too. So I've become super self-sufficient in terms of income. I don't really have to go anywhere. Like this place, if I want to Airbnb it, it's like snapped up, and that's been
Holy
awesome.
shit.
So
How much do you rent it for, man? For a night?
in the summer last year, it was 180 a night.
Wow.
And yeah, and with all the stuff, all the improvements I made, I'll probably up it if I'm doing that this summer again. So I could, you know, I was basically renting it out a little bit last summer and taking off fishing somewhere during the day.
That's
So,
legit, man. That is
yeah,
so legit. Yeah, if you could rent that place out for like a week, even in a month, and then just take off, fishing on a
yeah,
fishing camp, that would be. There you go. So
yeah,
during the summertime, you're gigging with live music and is that related to the tourist like economies of that area of the province? Like it's the summer,
yeah,
the busy seasons.
yeah, yeah. I've done that. Like it's always been a part of my life. Um, I've always done a mixture of things. You can't really put me in a box in terms of a job. Like people try and I just say don't bother. Like I kind of that's always been my main thing. Um, and I actually had a lot of gigs out east in Newfoundland the last year. So I spent a bit of time out there, which was a bit of a break from my cabin life for a couple months, which was kind of cool. So yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy life, crazy roller coaster of a life the last little while. But a mixture of gigging, Airbnb has been my main source of income over the last couple of years. And then my warden stint in Algonquin Park was another thing. So, you know, who knows what's coming next year? I don't know.
That's cool, man. That's so cool. So then, in the winter months, generally, you don't have to work. You're living off your savings in the wintertime.
That's been the last couple of years what I've done. Yeah. Mostly. Yeah.
And doing a lot of work on the cabin, fishing up work on the cabin.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
That's so cool,
yeah.
Man. And the main source of heat then is you've got like an iron stove, I imagine. Is that what it's behind you right there?
Right there.
Dang,
yep.
Man.
Yep.
Wow, that's a very wide stove. Like that thing probably throws some serious heat, man.
Yeah, it does actually. We're just looking at the stove here. Whoever's listening can see in there. It's not freezing cold today, so it's just taking a little bit of heat to keep this place warm. So it's kind of nice, and I like to sit right beside it.
Yeah, no, totally. And then upstairs is where you sleep. Can you show people, like, will it cut out if you?
Nope. So yeah, you just go up this little ladder here. Made this ladder out of cedar 2x4s, and here's where the loft is. The bed is made out of logs that were left over from the house build. So I just threw that together. And can you see okay, James?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool, yeah. And all these boards are from a house that was taken down around here. I chainsawed them out of the house and brought them here. And we built the walls up so you can stand up in the loft, which I'll do. And you look back down, and that's where I was. It's pretty high up. And yeah, it's super cozy up here. It's nice and warm. It's like a nice little treehouse feel up here.
That is so cool, man. Have you ever like done any sleepwalking and then gone right off the edge?
No, not yet. But there's a first for everything, so who knows?
Yeah, if you ever did sleepwalk, that would be pretty terrifying. But that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
You know, I remember seeing something on the Discovery Channel about like all ape species and monkeys. They always sleep in an elevated position, right? They always sleep up in trees. Just it's like how it's interesting. Most humans, right? We build like multi-level homes, and we always tend to sleep at least elevated off the floor, but then also a lot of times always on the second floor or the third floor of any structure that we live in, right? It's almost like this evolutionary thing because we want to get away from snakes and tigers and bears and stuff like that, you know? So that's cool though. I haven't seen a log cabin like that, honestly, man, that has that like second level for sleeping. That's really cool. Have you heard of the guy named Sean James? He's got this thing called My Self-Reliance. Okay.
Yeah. He actually got in touch with me at one point. He wanted to come do a video on my place, but that never happened. I don't know. But yeah, I like his channel. He's got some really cool stuff. He's kind of done it like, you know, the purest way in his cabin and stuff like that, which is great. He had a lot of experience, it seems, before. He's super talented.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, both you guys are kind of living a similar lifestyle. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, he doesn't have any solar panels or anything like that, right? He doesn't have any, or
I haven't seen
toilets even. He doesn't even have anything like that.
No. I don't know his story super well, but like I guess he seems to have another house somewhere because he's got a family. So I don't know if he lives at the cabin full time or if he's back and forth. I'm not sure what his deal is, but either way, he's built a very cool place.
Totally.
And it's great. I kind of wish it worked out. Another friend of mine came and did a big video on me. It kind of I think it's going on 350,000 views on YouTube. If you just Google my name. Yeah, it's about 25 minutes long almost. My buddy came here and did a big video on this place and everything. So yeah, if you're interested in checking it out, just Google Adam Ruzzo or put it in YouTube and Adam Ruzzo Cabin and it'll come up.
Yeah, that's cool,
yeah.
Man. Well, before we jump off, do you think you could show us the outside? Like, will the internet cut off if you show us the outside of your cabin? Or
we can try. I may cut off on us here. Let's see.
You've got some big windows going there too. That lets in a lot of light, I guess, with your skylight as well.
Yes, that is super helpful if you are off the grid. Like you want to, again, use very little power. So if you can cut back on lights and replace it with natural lights, that really helps.
So is this your foyer right here?
Oh.
This is the second room?
Yeah, this is my big messy porch here. Here you go. Big old mess.
Did you build this concurrently, like at the same time as the rest of it, or did you add this on?
I added this on. So I was living in the 320 square feet for a couple of years. And it's pretty small. Like, again, I wasn't trying to follow a certain kind of trend or anything. So like, I realized like if I had an extra porch, that would just be awesome because it's hard to live in 320 square feet, especially when you need a lot of tools and all this kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I built this on in I think it was 2018. I put this on and it's been great. It's great to have a secondary spot like this. So yeah, we'll see outside here. I'm going to stay close to the window and see. You still got me?
Yeah, hey, it still works. Oh, wow, wow. So do you have, those are cedar shingles up there?
They are, yeah. Cedar shingles up there. They're there's the cabin. And there's my big brush pile I got to deal with. Yeah.
That's so cool, man. That's awesome. Well, there's more videos on your Instagram. Oh, cool.
Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, where should people go to follow you, man, in your journey? Is it maybe your Instagram, which is at ADAM RUZZO Music, right?
Yeah.
And then TikTok, which is at Cabin Speak, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing mostly cabin stuff on TikTok. So if you're interested in that side of things, TikTok seems to be the place to be, I guess. And Instagram, I haven't been too up to speed on Instagram. So the best place to follow me is probably TikTok. And you know, if you just Google my name, I've got like a website and YouTube channel and all that stuff as well. That's more for music stuff. But yeah, if you're really into the cabin stuff, TikTok's the best place to find me. You know.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, it was fascinating, man, hearing about your story today. I'm out on the West Coast right now, actually, for work. But hopefully, after all COVID's over and stuff, man, we'd love to get up there and maybe we could I don't know, go out fishing or something like that, man. It would be cool to meet in person and check out the cabin and whatnot. But anyways, man, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And go follow ADAM RUZZO. You're an interesting cat, my friend. And keep living the dream, man. It's amazing. It's amazing what you're doing, and keep it up, dude. Share more. If anything, share more.
Yeah, thanks a lot, James. It's great to it was great to talk to you and meet you, quote unquote. And hang out sounds good.
Alrighty, man. Alrighty. Well, have a good one, man. And
you too.
Rocking.
All right. Cheers.